sure you all know about it a little bit, but I would be in favor of this for the simple reason I've lost a lot of employees, not due to money factors, but due to not having a place to live. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I need to submit this first. My name is Kirsten Beck. I'm an attorney with Foster Graham, Milstein, and Halisher. So we'd like to submit this, and we also want to make sure that the Planning Commission hearing is also part of the record.
We typically don't include the planning commission transcript in the record. Board of County Commission.
Again, my name is Kirsten Beck. I am an attorney. I have been spending 17 years practicing land use law, and one of my areas of expertise is affordable housing. I have never in my entire career stood in front of a board of county commissioners opposing a development before. So this is new territory for me, especially when it comes to one of the core areas of my practice. I completely understand the position that you guys are in right now. It is a very, very difficult issue with respect to workforce housing and all of the costs and constraints that go along with it. And what I learned, and the only reason why I am here today is because my partner David Foster is in Europe, and so I was a pinch hitter for that. And what I've learned through going through all of the materials and the plans through this process is that you guys have taken a tremendous amount of time to plan your community, to make sure that you guys are balancing all the needs of your communities, and making sure that you guys have everything that is available in terms of why people came here. When you read all of your plans, there is one theme that is very, very overarching that crops out at anyone who reads it, and everyone has mentioned this today, which is you guys have a really wonderful, unique balance between rural and urban areas. And part of how you create a transition between urban and rural areas is through transition areas and properties such as this. This property is currently zoned A1 right now. That is the actual underlying zoning of the property. And the transition zoning is not something that you can ignore. I fully appreciate and understand that one of the things you're required to do when looking at your general conformance with all of the plans that you have is to weigh every single one of those policies. Part of that policy, management between rural and urban areas. Transition zones are exactly for that purpose. There is a reason why we have transition zones. They're very smart planning. They allow you to naturally progress into density. We have rural areas only to the north of us. There is no other density to the north of us. This is all rural areas to the north of us. And that's what this property has been serving as for all of these years. You guys have gone through numerous master plan adjustments. You even went through the TDR map amendment. And through all of those processes, one, this designation of transition stayed the same. And two, when you went back to the TDR amendment process in 2012, the back portion of the property, which is really the big issue that we're talking about, was redesignated as neutral. I heard that maybe that was an error, maybe that was done in mistake. I also heard that when they went through the TDR map amendment process, how careful it was, how much planning was involved, how many other things went to it. So if the back half went to neutral, couldn't it perhaps have been because of the fact that this is supposed to be a transition zone, which is consistent with what the comp plan and LUD designation is? This property, or this project has been built to you as an affordable workforce unit project. It is not just an affordable workforce units project. If that was all that was in front of you today, we wouldn't be having the same conversations because there are special allowances within your code for workforce units to make concessions, to find other parameters. It is a huge parameter within all of your plans to make sure that that is one of the balances that you guys find, a way for workforce housing to be present. But let's talk about the market rate behind it. That's 14 units. It may be less units than the 22 workforce units, but that has a significantly larger amount of intensity than the workforce units. That area is 10 acres. The workforce units are 3 acres. Anyone, and we have our wildlife consultant who's going to talk to us a little bit after this, when you talk about impacts and maintaining impacts and ensuring that you are not having a negative impact on the environment, clustering of development, which is exactly what was done for the affordable, is what you're supposed to do. And what happened is we now have this back portion where we're going to have to eliminate about 30,000 trees from the property, deforestation of the property. That, to me, is not one of the other intents of the plans. You have a lot of competing things within these plans. you have rural and urban areas, you have transition zones, you have a need for workforce housing, you have a preservation for all of the areas and making sure that we don't deforest your parcels. It actually has in several key elements, it says we shouldn't be deforesting as part of this project, that is discouraged. And that's exactly what's gonna happen here. The area that's available for open space is where the old mine sat. So that area for open space, and again, our environmental consultant will get into it, is not usable area. This isn't where our wildlife is going to go and find a refuge. Our wildlife is going to get pushed off of this site entirely. And right now, this is actually a place for our habitat for our wildlife. So going through the elements and what's required of you sitting in the reviewing body and your standard of review, you must make findings of fact. Your findings of fact include general conformance with these plans. It is very, very difficult to see how the entire project, not the workforce housing units project, how the entire project complies and has general conformance with your plan. It simply just doesn't. And we keep hearing allowances of why you should overlook that and take one other element as more important than that. But you don't get to ignore your code. What you should be doing is going back to what is in the intent of all of these pieces, which is rural areas, urban areas, preservation of transition areas, preservation of the life that you guys have already built here that is beautiful, that has these natural transitions of densities. You should be having a master plan, comprehensive plan amendment process as part of the same discussion. What I also heard is that the applicants have been spending 18 months on this. Why don't we have a comp plan amendment as part of this process? I heard and I read in the staff report, well, we've done this twice before. We had 2 other PUDs that weren't consistent with the land use designation, and we just decided when we go back through our comprehensive plan amendment in 2018, we'll go ahead and amend that then. It doesn't actually work that way, where you get to go amend things after the fact. You have to actually work within the rules that are in front of you. And the rules that are in front of you say that you're supposed to conform with the land use designation. The heart of your plan, that is exactly what it is called in your plan. The heart of it is a land use designation, and this is transition zoning. And then when we look, also I want to talk a little bit about the infrastructure and your rezoning policies. You obviously have to go through a full site characteristics analysis. I'm not going to get into that. Our environmental consultant is going to assist with that. But I do want to make a couple mentions of infrastructure. And just because water and sewer are available, it doesn't mean that that's a great thing for us to do, to be extending our infrastructure into these rural corridors. It is very expensive. I understand why they have to have 14 market rate units. This is expensive to extend our infrastructure into these otherwise rural corridors. And part of the problem with that is back to this comprehensive plan amendment. Where do you want densities to come from? You have designated this as a transition zone. This has served as this for all this time. All the property owners around this, when they found this, they looked and they were able to see the zoning was A1 and that this was going to be a transition zone. There is nothing consistent about the market rate piece of this. I fully appreciate that your code has special provisions for the workforce units. There's nothing that is consistent that takes the entire application and supports this entire application as somehow meeting that requirement. And I think it is very problematic that you would expand infrastructure for this purpose. There's nothing that you can do when you do extraterritorial agreements. You often have higher fees that go along with it. There's nothing that the district's going to be able to do. They may offset some of the initial fees to the developer. That is a very common practice for the workforce units. It is not something that then you get any differentiation in fees after that. I've done several extraterritorial agreements, and those residents pay higher fees than you would if you were in town. And also, the traffic itself, that road, we had a traffic engineer take an analysis of that road, and the traffic would be increased 1,000%. 1,000%. That is a significant impact to that roadway system. Sure, the level of service won't change. 1,000%. That seems like that is going to be very difficult. And the transitional character of this property is really one of the things when you look through your rezoning policies, you have to look for a change in circumstance. All the surrounding properties have had development there for since 1990. So this isn't a new change in circumstance that all of a sudden warrants going ahead and satisfying what are your rezoning requirements, which is to identify why it is that this is an appropriate place for all of this project This doesn't meet that. There's no change to the surrounding area to justify a change this drastic and to also ignore what your codes require of it. And then the last thing is one of the things that you're required to do is make sure that PUD is consistent with the health, safety, and welfare and promoting the overall public benefit to the community. Again, fully appreciate the workforce units do that. But going against your plan in this manner, it is a larger policy discussion that you guys need to ask your community. You guys spend a significant amount of time on your planning documents. You take ample input. This kind of conversation about transitional densities going away is something that needs to be part of the broader conversation of how you guys envision the transition between urban areas and rural areas. You've been clear before that this is supposed to be a transition area. I don't see anything that has made this change. And I think with that, that is the last, in conclusion, I think the biggest issue here is really you guys are charged with weighing all of the policies. What I heard is that there is a very important policy, and everyone agrees with that, which is workforce units. The problem for this project is it isn't just a workforce units project. It's much larger than that, and your decision has to have support for every part of this project, and it doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you.